Have you ever stopped to think about the miracles of the child Jesus? Not the miracles we're used to hearing in traditions, but the incredible deeds of a child whose actions and words carried such powerful energy that they transformed lives and realities? What happened during his childhood, those years the Gospels remain silent about, but that forgotten texts still guard as precious secrets? Today we are going to uncover these lesser-known stories and understand how they can deeply and powerfully change your spiritual life. In this video, you will discover the power of Jesus' word even as a child, how his connection with nature and his spiritual authority are more relevant today than you might think. You will see how divine wisdom manifested from his earliest years and how it teaches us to live with more purpose, faith, and harmony. This isn't just an ancient story, it's a deep calling to your own spiritual transformation. Before we continue, let me ask you something simple. If you're here now, you were likely guided by divine inspiration. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, do that now, so you won't miss the next teachings that will help you deepen your connection with the Spirit. And if this video touches your heart, leave a like. It helps us spread this transformative message to more people who, like you, seek light and connection. Now, without further delay, let's explore these forgotten miracles and how they may be the key to your deepest spiritual journey. Stay with me until the end. What you're about to discover could change everything. It's curious how silence can speak so much. The Bible, that sacred book that guides us across so many dimensions of the soul and consciousness, keeps an almost absolute silence about Jesus' childhood years. Between his glorious birth and the moment he is found among the doctors at age 12, there are only glimpses, as if the divine invites us to meditate on the deeper mysteries in silence. This sacred interval offers us a pause for intuition to work, so that the light from within can guide us to the truth beyond words. But this very silence inspired generations of seekers of wisdom to look for answers in other writings, the apocryphal texts. These are records that were not canonized, but pulse with intense spiritual energy, bringing revelations that spark both wonder and deep reflection. Some of these childhood Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas and the Proto-Evangelium of James, describe a child Jesus who already manifested the presence of the Spirit through surprising acts. In them, we see a young one not yet fully in control of his power, shaping reality with a mere touch and awakening life from clay with the simple intention of the soul. It's a different portrait from what we see in canonical texts, yet deeply symbolic. The idea of a spirit in transformation, walking toward illumination, echoes in many traditions. Perhaps in reading these stories, we are invited to reflect on our own spiritual journey between the karma of our choices and the purpose we are still discovering. After all, we are all being shaped in the silence of our ordinary days. These writings, though considered apocryphal, cannot be dismissed as mere fantasy. They speak to our inner eternity. They exist as echoes from a time when spirituality had not yet been enclosed by doctrine, but flowed with the same natural rhythm as a prayer whispered to the wind. We can see them as windows into the sacred hidden in the ordinary. The faith of the early communities who read these passages was not necessarily concerned with dogma, but with real connection to the Spirit of Christ. And perhaps, as we read these texts today with discernment and humility, we can feel the invisible guardian guiding us, whispering that there is more yet to be revealed, and that true awakening only begins when we accept that not all silence is empty. Some silence exists only to prepare the heart for the next transformation. It is nearly impossible to read the apocryphal accounts of the child Jesus without feeling a shiver of mystery. They describe a raw power, a divine force still in formation, acting through simple, even childish gestures. Imagine a boy shaping birds from clay and, with a breath, giving them life. This speaks not only of miracle working, but of the very creative energy present since the beginning. This story, in its symbolism, reminds us that intuition doesn't need maturity to manifest, only purity of heart. The Spirit of Jesus, even in childhood, already vibrated with eternal consciousness. But at the same time, these accounts show moments where he corrects or even punishes, revealing the challenge of achieving harmony between the human and the divine. These gestures may seem unsettling for those who seek an idealized image of a serene Jesus. However, they invite us to dive deeper into the concept of transformation. A growing spirit, learning to wield its light, is no less sacred. On the contrary, it mirrors our own spiritual journey. Sometimes we are impatient even when seeking truth. Sometimes we act without fully understanding our karma or the impact of our actions. But like the child Jesus, we are on a path of learning, guided by the invisible guardian who leads us step by step. These accounts humanize us and elevate us at the same time. They show that even the sacred has stages and that spiritual awakening is a process. Reading these passages with an open heart is also a practice of meditation. Not the meditation of absolute silence, but the kind that reflects on the deeper meaning of the stories. Ask yourself, what if these controversial gestures of the child Jesus are not mistakes, but lessons? What if they are invitations to wisdom, peace, and faith from one who learns from each experience? After all, spiritual tradition is rich with paradoxes, where the divine also manifests in the unexpected. These episodes show us that spiritual growth includes contradictions, and it is precisely within them that we may find the revelation of our divine humanity. There is something deeply moving about imagining young Jesus before the teachers of the law, teaching with a wisdom that transcended age, tradition, and the limits of reason. This scene, also found in the canonical Gospels, shows not just a prodigious child, but a spirit already awakened to eternity. He didn't just recite the letters, he intuited their hidden meanings, perceived the sacred vibration between the lines. The alphabet to him was not just a collection of symbols, but a map to divine revelation. This deep understanding reveals how awakening doesn't depend on age or maturity, but on a living connection with the Father. This early wisdom wasn't arrogant, it was inspiring. When Jesus spoke, the teachers marveled, not out of vanity, but because they sensed a voice guided by the energy from above. It teaches us that spiritual knowledge isn't born only of study, but of constant prayer, of inspiration that comes from a soul surrendered to God's purpose. Even today, there are children who seem to speak with the clarity of elders, perhaps echoes of a past incarnation, perhaps pure grace manifesting. What matters is not doubting the Spirit's ability to express itself when there is openness to the truth. Each of us carries that spark that can ignite if we nourish faith with gratitude and daily practice of prayer. Ultimately, this scene is a powerful reminder. All true knowledge is meant for transformation. The child Jesus did not impress to be admired, but to awaken in others a desire to turn toward the sacred. When he spoke of the scriptures, he touched the deepest layers of the collective consciousness. And this still happens. When we read with the heart, the word becomes alive, relevant, urgent. Perhaps this is the true lesson of that episode. Wisdom is not the privilege of a few, but is available to all who seek it with humility, intuition, and inner peace. In the craft of carpentry, among woods and simple tools, the child Jesus began to reveal silently the grandeur of his purpose. Helping Joseph, his earthly father, he immersed himself in the common routine, learning the gestures of care and building. But there was a moment described in ancient texts when a poorly cut piece of wood was miraculously adjusted by him. And in that small detail, we see the light of eternity shine through the ordinary. That was not just a miracle, it was a sign. The stretched wood symbolizes the Spirit's power to align what is out of order, both in the material world and in the human soul. This hidden miracle teaches us about harmony. Sometimes in our spiritual walk, we feel that some pieces just don't fit. Broken relationships, stifled dreams, crooked paths. But when we are connected to the divine, even what seemed impossible can be restored. The carpentry of Jesus is also a teaching on how to transform the ordinary into the sacred. Every hammer blow, every nail, every wood chip was a silent prayer, a practice of active meditation. And we too can live this way, transforming each daily gesture into an expression of faith, gratitude, and purpose. In the simple life of Nazareth, the child Jesus learned more than techniques. He learned to embody the tradition of the just, to respect the timing of things, to listen to the wood before cutting it. This reminds us that often the Spirit speaks through the details, that great revelations come in the small fidelities of everyday life, that awakening doesn't require grand stages, but can happen right there, while you bake bread, sweep a sidewalk, or care for someone with love. That's how Jesus grew, ordinary and at the same time profoundly divine. The flight into Egypt, told in just a few verses in the canonical Gospels, gains vivid colors in the apocryphal texts. There we learn it was not just a time of protection, but also of learning. The child Jesus, even in exile, was immersed in cultures, symbols, and millennia-old spiritual traditions. Imagine the impact of that experience. Egypt, with its temples and rituals, its ancestral energy and mysteries, was the first field of revelation outside Jewish territory. Jesus, even as a child, came into contact with other forms of faith, and this expanded his consciousness. This detail is crucial to understanding the universality of his future ministry. The spiritual intuition that blossomed during these silent years was the seed of the mission that would come later. Egypt symbolizes transcendence and trial. It is where we learn to walk even in strange lands, where we are trained in the art of inner listening. For Jesus, it was an opportunity to grow not only physically, but spiritually. He absorbed wisdom, but also learned about the human condition, the pain of fleeing, the weight of silence, the waiting. And that prepared him to later deliver a message that would touch not only Israel, but all of humanity. And here lies a vital lesson. Sometimes we are led into the Egypt of our lives, moments of exile, displacement, and confusion. But if we walk with the Spirit in peace, these seasons become schools for the soul. We may come out of them wiser, more humble, more connected to the sacred. It was in Egypt that Joseph, the patriarch, saved a nation. It was in Egypt that Moses received his calling. It was in Egypt that Jesus was raised. And perhaps it is in our personal Egypt that the next great transformation is about to unfold. It is astonishing to realize how, even at a young age, the child Jesus operated not only through gestures, but through the living force of the Word. In the apocryphal Gospels, there are accounts where a single phrase from him was enough to calm, correct, or transform. When he said, "Rise," the paralyzed stood. When he commanded something to be, the universe seemed to respond with immediate obedience. This takes us back to Genesis, where God creates everything through his word. And here is the Word made flesh, still a child, reaffirming that same creative power. His speech was prayer, decree, and revelation. It wasn't mere precocious wisdom. It was the Logos himself manifesting in human form. This truth invites us to reflect on the power of our own voice. How often do we use words that wound, belittle, or alienate, when we could be healing, welcoming, and liberating? The example of the child Jesus calls us to spiritual responsibility. If we are made in the image of the Creator, our words also carry seeds of creation. Words are portals. They can be instruments of light or of confusion. That is why spiritual practice requires vigilance over what we say and how we say it. May our speech reflect prayer, our tone carry grace, and our words open pathways of peace wherever they go. As we meditate on this, we begin to understand that to speak is a sacred gift. The human voice, when aligned with the Spirit, becomes an instrument of miracles. The child Jesus teaches us that heaven does not require a shout to listen, just truth, pure intent, and faith. And perhaps this is one of the most forgotten lessons of the gospel. The power of the word does not lie in its volume, but in its vibration. If the child from Nazareth, with his soft voice, could transform reality, then each of us, speaking with love, can also touch the infinite. Among the miracles attributed to the child Jesus, some of the most touching involve nature and animals. Ancient stories tell of him, speaking with creatures of the field, blessing herds, and even healing wounded animals. In one account, he commands clay birds to fly, and they obey as if summoned from Eden itself. These acts are not merely demonstrations of power, but expressions of profound harmony with creation. Jesus, even as a child, already carried within him the reconciliation of heaven and earth, and by touching the animals with compassion and authority, he revealed that the kingdom of God extends to all life. These and kinds of miracles invite us to a spirituality that surpasses the human and reaches the cosmic. In many mystical traditions, animals are seen as message bearers, as reflections of the universal soul. When the child Jesus acts on their behalf, he is saying, without words, that all that breathes is sacred. This perception reshapes our way of living. We begin to treat the earth with reverence, animals with tenderness, and the environment with responsibility. It becomes a prayer in motion, where every care for creation is a gesture of worship. At the heart of these stories is a profound invitation to restore our connection with the whole. Just as Jesus recognized and honored life in every creature, we too are called to see beyond appearances. A bird, a flower, a wounded animal, they each carry a fragment of divine light. To care for creation is to care for the temple of the Spirit. And in doing so, we become co-creators of the new earth that he came to proclaim, even as a child, through simple and miraculous acts. While many narratives about the child Jesus focus on his extraordinary feats, there is something sacred also in his play. He ran with friends, molded clay figures, climbed trees, and explored the fields. But there was always something different about his presence. Even in games, there was an aura of peace, a sense of presence that touched the hearts around him. This teaches us that spirituality is not built solely on formal prayers and moments of silence, but also on the simple joy of daily life. Play, when lived with a pure heart, is a form of praise, a way of dwelling fully in the now. This perspective transforms our understanding of the sacred. Laughter, imagination, creativity, they are all channels through which the Spirit can manifest. Jesus, though the Word made flesh, did not reject childhood. He lived it with intensity and lightness. This reminds us that the spiritual path need not be heavy. Lightness of soul is also a sign of maturity. To laugh with others, to celebrate the beauty of an ordinary day, to play with respect and love. All this is part of the invisible worship offered to the Creator. Play can be prayer when done with presence and gratitude. The lesson here is deep. To be like children is not merely a metaphor for purity. It is a state of being that brings us closer to the kingdom. Jesus himself would later say, "Unless you become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." The boy who played in Nazareth knew this. His life was a dance between the human and the divine. Through play, he taught us to trust, to smile with faith, to live with an awakened heart. The Spirit reveals himself in joy as well. Even as a child, the boy Jesus astonished adults with an authority that surpassed the natural. It was not arrogance or pride, it was a presence that silenced, a gaze that pierced appearances and touched the soul. When he spoke, even the priests fell silent. When he made a decision, it was clear to all that it came not from ego, but from a higher call. This spiritual authority was the living expression of a soul in full alignment with the Father. It did not come from age or study, but from an inner source. It teaches us that true spiritual leadership is never imposed, it emanates. This truth challenges many. How can a child teach the wise? How can someone with no formal training hold access to the mysteries? But this is the central point of the forgotten gospel. God does not follow human protocols. He chooses the humble, the simple, the pure. And the authority of the boy Jesus reveals a force that we still need to rediscover. The force of the Spirit acting where we least expect. The silence of the righteous speaks louder than 1,000 sermons. A pure gaze can convert more than any doctrine. And here lies the key. This authority excluded no one. It awakened them. Whoever came to Jesus in faith received healing. Whoever listened with an open heart left transformed. Even as a child, he was already a shepherd of souls. And his authority was the authority of love. He did not dominate, he served. He did not control, he elevated. May we seek this same presence on our journey, an authority that comes from the Spirit, not the ego, from surrender, not pride. Though Jesus' mission would be fully revealed in adulthood, the first signs of his calling were present very early on. There was a sense of purpose that followed him in every gesture, every word. In the oldest accounts, there are moments when he would withdraw alone to pray, even as a child, as if already sensing the weight and grandeur of what was to come. This inner calling was not imposed from outside. It flowed like a spiritual spring that never ceased. Somehow, he already knew that his life was not his alone. It was an offering to the world. This early awareness echoes in many souls called by God. Even in childhood, there is a feeling of not belonging to the world as it is, a deep yearning for something more, a longing for justice, truth, communion with the eternal. The boy Jesus lived this with serenity and left it as a model for us. Sometimes our children show this sensitivity, and we must welcome it, not repress it. The spiritual calling does not follow human logic. It pulses where there is space, where there is purity, where there is silence to listen. And perhaps this is the most powerful legacy of the forgotten gospel, to show that the call can come early, quietly, discreetly, but still be real. That preparation for ministry does not begin with sermons, but with the cultivation of the Spirit, through prayer, through listening, through surrender. The child Jesus teaches us that no one is too small to hear the voice of God, and that even before the cross, there was already a living mission within the heart of a child who carried the world. So what did you think about these revelations of the miracles of the boy Jesus? How do these forgotten stories touch your heart and your spiritual journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below sharing what resonated with you most and how you feel these teachings can transform your life. If this message touched you, don't forget to leave a like so more people can be reached with this message of faith, wisdom, and transformation. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the upcoming videos that will continue to deepen your spiritual connection. And if you want to keep exploring these mysteries and profound teachings, click the recommended video now appearing on your screen. I'm sure it will be another important step in your journey toward illumination. I look forward to seeing you in the next videos, my friend. May your faith continue to grow, and may the divine light guide every step you take. See you soon.